I can't believe I'm doing this today. I'm probably going to I'm certainly going to regret this. But as many of you know, I often talk about leaning a little more to the right. But also, a lot of you have kind of pushed back on me about that and suggested that maybe I'm a little more moderate and centerish than I realize. And I think there may be some truth to that. I think, especially as I've gotten older, and I think this is true with a lot of people, my views have mellowed some. I think we become more moderate as we get older. I think we gain wisdom and we gain insight and we realize it's not all my side good, other side bad. So I thought it would be interesting. I haven't done anything like this for a long time. Please don't turn this into something that's about a debate, but I'm going to take a political compass test today. I believe this is the same one that my friend Matt Beat took a while back. So it'll be interesting to do this, something a little different today, and see where I turn out on all this. I think I'll probably lean slightly to the right. I don't know if it's going to come out authoritarian right or libertarian right, but I think I'll probably lean to the right a little bit. So here we go. Let's dive into this. If economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interest of transnational corporations. Wow, we're starting with a heavy one, aren't we? Sure. I guess I would agree with that. I would always support my country whether it was right or wrong. Absolutely not. Strongly disagree with that. If your country's wrong, your country's wrong. Nobody's country is perfect. And one of the beauties of being an American, like in many countries where we have the freedom to speak out, we can say so when we think our country's wrong. So no one chooses their country of birth, true. So it's foolish to be proud of it. I agree with the first half of that statement. I disagree with the second half. I don't think there's anything wrong with being proud of your country. Whatever country that is. Every country's got things to be proud of and things to not be proud of. So I'm going to disagree, but not strongly disagree with that. Our race, what race is that? Has many superior qualities compared with other races. No. No, there's so many other factors besides just racism that determine those kinds of things. All right, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I think politically speaking, that's probably true. Yeah, okay. Military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. Ooh, that's a tough one because while it's important to have things like international law and have agreements among nations, wow. Boy, I wish there was like a in between because I don't agree or disagree with that really. I'm going to slightly agree with that one. There is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. Oh, absolutely true. Absolutely agree with that. All right, next page. Now the economy. We're talking attitudes here, not the FTSE index. People are ultimately divided more by class than nationality. I think I'd probably slightly agree with that. I think that people from various countries might find more they agree with based on those things. Perfect example of that. When I was in France recently, and I actually just talked about this in the podcast I recorded this morning about the Lost Battalion, I was in eastern France in the town of Châtel-Chehery, which is where Alvin York did what he did to earn the Medal of Honor, and I felt very at home there. I felt very connected to those people. Even though we spoke a different language, even though they were French and I was American, it felt like I was in a small town in Pennsylvania in the hills. So absolutely, I think I felt more in common with those people than I do with people in New York City here in America. Just in terms of socioeconomic background, just in terms of kind of culture. It was interesting. So yeah, I think I would probably agree with that. Controlling inflation is far more important than controlling unemployment. I don't know if I agree with that. Though I think that's a very general statement to make, and I think that could mean a lot of different things. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. I think that's probably true. I think humanity in general, if left unchecked, tends to err on the side of do what you want and get away with it. They'll push the boundaries to whatever you can. And so if you don't have boundaries, there are going to be some companies that are going to do whatever they want. And so I think that having some regulations does really matter and is important. So I would agree with that. I don't know if I'd strongly agree with that, but I'll agree with that. From each according to his ability, to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea. I disagree with that. I know where that's coming from, because I don't think it can ever be enacted on paper. Sure, but because human beings are involved and human beings are at their core selfish people, it never works out that way. So I'm going to disagree with that. The freer the market, the freer the people. That's a tough one. I agree with that statement in principle, but again, I recognize the need for regulation because free people tend to stomp on other free people. So you kind of have to keep them from that sometimes. It's a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. I agree that that's a sad reflection on society, but at the same time, if we didn't buy it, it wouldn't get sold. There's supply and demand, and we are creating the demand for that product. So I'm going to disagree just because demand creates supply. People buy stuff, and so people sell it. If we don't like it, we shouldn't buy it. Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. I strongly disagree with that. It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. I guess it is regrettable, but it's the system that we live in. And, so often, so much of the problem is not that people take advantage of it. It's that we allow them we create the circumstances in which people take advantage of that stuff. I think I disagree with that. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. Yeah, I agree with that. The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders. Social responsibility? No, I disagree with that. I think companies have an obligation to do much more than that. The rich are too highly taxed. I disagree that they're too highly taxed. I think we should probably close some loopholes. I don't agree with the idea that somehow we should just put these oppressively, well, I shouldn't say oppressively, that there should be like obscenely high taxes on wealth. Because you could take all the money in the world and it wouldn't pay for some of the projects that people have in mind. But I do think that there are loopholes that we could close to make things maybe a little more fair, because I think it's just too easy for rich people to get out of having to pay taxes by taking advantage of the laws that there are. So those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. Ooh, that's a tough one. I think it's true in general that people who have the ability to pay are always going to be able to access better services. That's a tough one. Because I'm not a fan of socialized medicine, even though I know it works in some countries and works quite well. I also see a lot of negatives to it. And I say that as someone who has his own private medical insurance. I pay for mine myself because I'm self-employed. So I think I probably disagree with that. Governments should penalize businesses that mislead the public. Yeah, I think that's fair. If you're going to lie, you should be punished for that. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopoly. Listen, economics is not my strong suit, but I think I'd probably agree with that. Okay, here we go. We are on to Section 3, and this is probably where I'm going to anger some people. We're talking about personal social values. Abortion, when the woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal. You guys know that I'm a conservative Christian. I understand this is a complicated issue, and to answer this, especially given the political climate in which we are and decisions that may be coming out pretty soon, I know this is going to probably upset some people. But based on this statement, the way it's worded, I'm going to agree with that. Not strongly agree, but agree. This is my personal view on it. It's not something I want to argue about with anybody, one way or the other. And just understand that I'm coming at this as a conservative Christian who has a particular view on life and when it begins and stuff like that. So understand that it's a complicated issue and there are a lot of factors in all of that. All authority should be questioned. Strongly agree with that. Questioned. Not necessarily all authority should be opposed. That would be a very different statement to make. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. That's an Old Testament biblical viewpoint. Strongly disagree with that when we're talking about government and talking about people within that government. The state has a role to play in punishing crime, and the punishment should fit the crime, I believe. But I believe this idea of an eye for an eye and a tooth for tooth is much more about personal revenge, and therefore I strongly disagree with it. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. I disagree with that. I think there's a role to play for taxpayers, and taxpayers have the vote on this. We vote for our representatives who will then vote on how our tax money is spent. And if the people we vote in to represent us choose to subsidize theaters and museums, I think that's a part of who we are as a culture, is to recognize art and recognize theater and those sorts of things. So I got no problem with government subsidy of those kinds of things on a limited basis. Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. That's an interesting one. I kind of slightly agree with that. I really kind of feel like that's something that should be left up to the parents. If I want to take my kids out of school for 2 weeks to take them to Europe to experience culture and history firsthand, I shouldn't have to deal with the school sending me angry letters saying your kids missed too many hours of school, which is what would happen here if I did that. So I kind of agree with that, I think. All people have their rights, but it is better for all of us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. I strongly disagree with that. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. I agree with that. I never really did much of that with my own kids. I personally have no problem with that if it's done in what I think is an appropriate manner. I know some of you are going to disagree with that. I have no problem with that on a limited basis. It depends on the kid, right? My oldest, my daughter, we spanked her a few times, and she looked at us and she's like, "I bet you thought that hurt." It wasn't effective with her, and so we didn't do it. My younger two, I don't think we ever really did much of that, just because it wasn't necessary. We found pretty early on that our kids our boys, especially my middle son Caleb, who's going to be 15 this year, if you looked at him cross-eyed, he would cry. So you didn't have to punish him that way. So I think it really just depends. But I agree that's sometimes the way to deal with it. I was spanked as a kid a few times, not often. There's a line between abuse and appropriate, but it's natural for children to keep some secrets from their parents. It's natural for kids to feel that way. As a parent, I tell my kids all the time, there is no such thing as privacy in this house. As long as you live under my roof, as long as I'm responsible for you, you have no expectation of privacy. It's natural, but I don't know that I agree with it. So I'm going to say disagree. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. Here's how I view that. I personally have never tried it, have no interest in it. Never tried cigarettes for that matter. As long as alcohol and tobacco are legal in this country, which they are, kind of agree that we shouldn't make that illegal either. So I guess I'll agree with that. The prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs. I think that makes sense. One of the things I constantly say, like with my daughter was doing all this crazy algebra and geometry stuff this year. And I found myself thinking, why in the world is my daughter doing this, having to do this? She is never going to use the stuff that she was doing this year in her junior year. She's never going to use any of that in her life. She's not going into any kind of field related to where she's going to need to be factoring polynomials. It seems completely pointless to me for her to be doing that. So I strongly agree with that statement. And I also really agree with the idea that not every kid should be getting pushed to go to college. Trade schools, a lot of different other areas. We are not going to push my kids to go to college. I think probably my kids are going to end up going to college, but that's going to be their choice. And it's not going to be because I said you have to go to college when you get out of high school. There's a lot of other ways. What I'm doing today, I'm more successful than I've ever been in my life, and it has zero to do with my college education. Just saying. People with serious inheritable disabilities should not be allowed to reproduce. I strongly disagree with that. We can't be making that decision. The most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline. I don't think that's the most important thing for them to learn. Do I think that's important for them to learn? Yes. But the most important? Nah, disagree. There are no savage and civilized people. There are only different cultures. No, there kind of are. There are definitely certain cultures that are more savage and uncivilized than others. I'm going to disagree with that. Well, there's quite a few in this one. Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society support. Strongly agree with that. When you are troubled, it is better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. There's a time and place for that, but I don't know what this has to do with political. I'm going to disagree with that. First-generation immigrants can never be fully integrated within their new country. No, I don't think that's true at all. Here's how I view that. I think if you are going to a new country, whatever that country is, and you want to become a part of that country, you should assimilate yourself into that country's structure, society, culture, while also maintaining a pride and in the heritage that you have. So if you're an Italian immigrant coming to America, become an American, but also be proud of your Italian culture. And if you want to speak Italian at home and you want to, celebrate your Italian culture, by all means do that. My neighbor across the street flies an Italian flag. Good for him. No problem with that. But he also flies an American flag because he's an American. I don't think you should go to a new country and then expect that country to bow to your heritage. I think if you're going to a new place, you should. If I decide to move to Germany, I should assimilate myself to the German culture while also being proud of my American heritage. So, I disagree that generation Americans can never be fully integrated, or immigrants, not just Americans. What's good for the most successful corporations is always ultimately good for all of us. Strongly disagree with that. Something could be really good for a corporation and make it a lot of money and make it successful, but not be good for society. No broadcasting institution, however independent its content, should receive public funding. I kind of agree with that. That's all I'll say about that one. And how you see the wider society. Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. See, I'm one of those people that kind of, and this is maybe a little authoritarian in me, doesn't really have a problem with that. Like, it doesn't bother me that they do all the stuff they do at the airport if it means I'm going to be safe, right? I kind of disagree with that. Like, I never had a problem with the Patriot Act, and I know that probably puts me in the minority of people. Maybe it's because I've never been on the receiving end of some of that stuff. But like when I was in Germany and I got pulled over by the German police and they never told me why and they made me get out of the car and they searched my car, that kind of thing would never have flown here in the United States. But it didn't bother me that they did that because I didn't have anything to hide. So I guess I wasn't too worried about it. I don't know. A significant advantage of a one-party state, there's no advantages to that, is that it avoids all the arguments and delayed progress in a democratic political system. Strongly disagree. I wish we had more parties in the United States than just the two, because I hate both of them. I think they both suck big time, and I wish we had other choices. I really do. Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. I wouldn't say only wrongdoers need to be worried, so I would slightly disagree with that. I would say for the most part that's kind of true, but I still think we need to be really careful with that kind of stuff. The death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes. Strongly agree with that. Listen, I have times where I go back and forth on the death penalty. But then every so often along comes a case that reminds me that some people just need to be removed from this planet as quickly as possible. I had a friend. I don't want to get too much into this story, but a kid I knew growing up. His name was Ray Fife. And when he was 12 years old, he took a shortcut through the woods to get to a Boy Scout meeting, and he was attacked by two guys. I think one was 17, one was 19, and they did unspeakably horrific things to him before killing him. One of them, because he was 17 at the time, got life in prison. The other one was sentenced to death. Ray was killed in 1985. And the older one who was sentenced to death is still on death row 37 years later. There was a story I read one time years ago, I remember reading, about a woman, a guy pretended to be the plumber, and he brutalized this woman and killed her, and then spent the next several hours with her cell phone calling people in her contacts list and telling them what he had done to her in graphic detail. People like that, I got no problem with executing at all. So, yeah, strongly agree. In civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. I don't like how that's worded. I agree with the basic principles of it, that there are going to always be people in positions of authority. I disagree with how that's worded, but abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. What's that? I don't know what that's got to do with politics, but I strongly disagree, because abstract art is considered art by some people, or again, we wouldn't put it in art museums, right? Some people consider that art. I might not understand it, but that doesn't mean somebody else doesn't understand it. So, I disagree with that. In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. I don't think it should be more important. I disagree with that. I think there's a place for both. I think there should be consequences for people's choices and the crimes they commit, but I think there's also a role to be played in the criminal justice system in rehabilitation. I think we can do both. It's a waste of time to try to rehabilitate some criminals. I think I agree with that. I wouldn't strongly agree with that, because who's making that decision, right? Who is in a position to decide who it's a waste of time to rehabilitate and who it's not? I think after a certain number of crimes, you can probably figure out that some people aren't interested in rehabilitation. But so I kind of agree with that. The business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. I strongly disagree, because what's the point in making money and having a job if there isn't something to make it worthwhile, right? I think both are important. Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. I don't think we're there anymore. I'm a stay-at-home dad. I mean, I'm a stay-at-home dad who also makes most of the income in the house these days, but that doesn't make my wife's role any less important. We both have a role in home. Every situation is different. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do that. So I strongly disagree. I think a mother and a father both have a role, an important role in the home. And then how they work out who makes the money and who works, that's every family for themselves, right? Multinational companies are unethically exploiting the plant genetic resources of developing countries. I'm not entirely sure what they're after there. But that's a very general statement, but I would agree that some are. Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. I guess I'll strongly agree with that one too. I shouldn't say strongly, but agree with that one. All right, page 5. If you got through that okay, you'll find these propositions on religion a breeze. Oh boy, here we go. Remember, I'm a conservative Christian, all right? So understand that's where I'm coming from with this. Astrology accurately explains many things. Strongly disagree with that. You cannot be moral without being religious. I disagree. I strongly disagree. I think morality is based in something, and for some people their morality is based in religion. Other people, their morality is based in other things. So I disagree with that. Charity is better than Social Security as a means of helping the genuinely disadvantaged. I wish that charity took care of that stuff so that Social Security wasn't necessary, but I disagree. I think there's a place for both things. Some people are naturally unlucky. I strongly disagree with that. There is luck, and there's a role that luck plays. There's chance in everything, but I don't think anybody's naturally unlucky. I think some people naturally make bad decisions. I say this all the time. People say everything happens for a reason, and I like to say everything happens for a reason, and sometimes the reason is that you're stupid and make poor choices. It's important that my child's school instills religious values. I disagree with that. I think it's important for me as a father to instill my religious values on my kids, and then let them make their choice. Because if a school instills religious values, who decides what religious values? I strongly agree. I'm a Christian. I believe Christianity is right, which means I, by definition, believe other religions are wrong. But if I insist that Christianity should be taught in schools, then shouldn't other religions also be taught in schools? And do I really want that? I don't know. I don't agree that religion should be kept completely out of the public sphere. I'm not one of those people. But I also don't think it should be established enforced on people. All right. Sex. Sex outside marriage is usually immoral. Interesting one. I don't know, again, what this has to do with politics. It's kind of an interesting question because I agree, morally speaking and religiously speaking, that that's true. So I'm going to agree with that just on a personal standpoint. Does that mean I think it should be outlawed or banned or anything like that? No, of course not. But as the product of an extramarital relationship, who therefore grew up without a father in his life, without his biological father in his life, I understand that's one of the reasons why I think sex within the context of marriage avoids a lot of issues. But anyway, all right. A same-sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. Strongly agree with that. Pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population. I believe that pornography is incredibly destructive, both to the women and men who are portrayed in pornography, and also to the consumer. And I will say that as someone who has overcome an addiction to pornography much younger in my life. I, to this day, deal with the consequences of that addiction, even though I'm many years removed from it. I think pornography is horribly destructive to society. That said, I agree that it should be legal. I wish it wasn't. But that's, again, personally, I think it's terribly destructive, and I would do anything to have avoided ever experiencing it for the first time. Anyway, what goes on in a private bedroom between consenting adults is no business of the state. Strongly agree with that. No one can feel naturally homosexual. I have my own ideas on how people become homosexual. I don't necessarily believe anyone's born that way. I believe people always feel that way. But listen, that's not for me to decide. I strongly disagree that no one feels naturally homosexual. I absolutely believe people do feel naturally that way. These days, openness about sex has gone too far. I would agree with that to a point. I think some of that stuff is better left behind the scenes. All right, here we go. Let's see where I stand. Well, I came out almost exactly where Mr. Beat did on his. Interesting. Authoritarian left. Okay. That's really fascinating. Because I'm pretty sure that's exactly where he came out on this whole thing. Economic scale, I'm kind of looking at this. The starting point of the political compass is in 2001 when we recognized the inadequacies of the standard political measure. Okay, so this isn't actually where I am. That's the initial thing that it shows. Okay. So I am actually libertarian left. Who knew? Wow. I'm not surprised by the libertarian part. I'm a little surprised by the left part. Okay. So, and I get where some of that's coming from. So, for example, it's probably viewed as a right-leaning viewpoint to say that gay people should not be allowed to adopt. And I said they should. So I get that. So I can see how some of my answers cause me to lean more left. So there you go. As much as I talk about being conservative politically, I actually come out slightly leaning to the left. Who knew? All right, that's kind of cool. Let me know your thoughts about all that. I got nothing to add to that. If you want to see me do more stuff like this, if you have a particular one you'd like me to try out, another one of these kinds of tests, Let me know in the comment section below. You can't put a link because it'll get blocked by YouTube automatically, but let me know. Thanks for watching.